It is the morning after Super Bowl 60. I'm your host, Jared Smith. Thanks for joining us on this latest edition, episode 22. Time certainly flies when we're having fun. The Super Bowl is in the books. We're going to talk about it. We're obviously going to break down what we saw. We're going to kind of treat it like any other normal football week in terms of, Fugazi result. Would we upgrade either team? I know it doesn't matter because there's no game next week, but we're going to go through our process one last time. We're going to close the book on the 2025 football season. Maybe I'll take a peek into 2026, do a way too early prediction, and we'll just stash it away because obviously a lot could change between now and then. Besides that, it's going to be a bit of a different show. Again, we're kind of transitioning to a different vibe of the show in the football offseason, right? I say this, there's two seasons for me with content. There's football season and there's not football season. And I'm going to have to find my sea legs and my routine with how I handle this podcast. I am talking about expanding it to more than just one day. I do have some exciting connections that hopefully will amplify this podcast in the spring and summer months and get it really in a good position for next football season. So I'm going to be working on that. And I'm also going to be taking a fucking vacation, to be perfectly frank. Next week, I'll be out of town. There will be no podcast next weekend. No podcast next weekend. I'm taking 1 week off, and then I will return the following weekend. It'll be March 1st, Sunday, March 1st. How do I know that? Because my birthday is Saturday, February 28th. I will be turning 40 years old on that day. And I figured the day after, the morning after my 40th birthday, then I will do another podcast and kind of set the tone for March. So I'm giving myself a little bit of a break over the next 2 weeks. This will be, again, the last podcast until – actually, let me make sure I have that date right. Yes, so then we'll be taking 2 weeks off. 2 weeks off. No podcast next weekend. Maybe I'll do one the week after. We'll probably do one the week after. So no podcast next week, and then we will do a podcast on the 22nd of February, and then we'll see where we stand from there. So a week off. Enjoy your Valentine's Day. Take care of your loved ones. Perfect weekend to spend time with your family and non-sports people because pretty soon the weekends are going to be dominated by college basketball coming up in a couple weeks. And then I also just want to be able to focus on me for a little bit, to be perfectly honest. Football season's long. I need a break. I'm going to Florida next week. I'm going to go see my family. My mom, we're having a 70th birthday party for her. Sorry, I just outed her age, but I don't think she cares at this point because she's in great shape. She's kicking it, and I'm very excited to see her and the rest of my family, my sister, and my niece, or she's my nephew and two nieces. And I'll be spending some family time with them next week. So no podcast next week. We will return in 2 weeks on Sunday, February 22nd, and that podcast will be ready for you on Monday, the 23rd. And I'll kind of, at that point, I should have hopefully some more information about how I'm going to handle March Madness and maybe some new bells and whistles as we move forward. All right, let's get into the Super Bowl. Kind of a one-sided game, but when you look at the box score, so the Seahawks win 29-13. They cover the spread. Game stays under. But when you look at the box score, it actually looks a lot more even than you might expect a game of that margin, and the reason being the turnovers and the sacks. So New England actually was plus 8% net success rate, and they won yards per play. But a lot of that was garbage time, and they were a -8 in turnover and sack ratio. They lost the turnover battle 3-zip, and they lost the sack battle 5-1. So really a dominating performance for Seattle defensively, and that was the story in the game. I thought New England's defense held up pretty well. 33% success rate, holding the Seahawks at bay. They held Seattle to 4 for 16 on third downs. Sam Darnold looked a little shaky early in the game. And I thought the Patriots defense held up fine. Honestly, that really was not the reason they lost that game. And obviously Drake May just wasn't ready for the moment. I think the moment was a little bit too big for him. I think that Seahawks defense, you give them a ton of credit. Mike McDonald he's a hell of a coach. First coach ever to win a Super Bowl and also call the defensive signals. Bill Belichick never did that. Chuck Noll, Tom Landry never did that. Mike McDonald, really interesting story, about to leave coaching and become accountant or something in like the corporate world. And then he got called back to coaching, and the rest is, as they say, is history. Sam Darnold, got to be happy for him. Didn't really have to do a whole lot in this game. Really didn't play that well, frankly, but was great during the regular season, was great in the NFC Championship game when they did need him, right? The Rams were obviously significantly more successful offensively against this Seahawks defense than the Patriots, and Darnold needed to play well in that game against LA, and he did. Didn't really need to do much against the Niners, and obviously the Seattle offense kind of cakewalked in this game. They had a pick six. It was more like a fumble six, but it went in the books as officially as a pick six, and just the turnovers and the pressure. New England was unable to stop the Seattle front, and it really wasn't even a lot of blitzing. Actually, let me check what the blitz numbers were in the game. New England was blitzing, and we talked about that coming in, just the way that the Patriots just went absolutely berserk with their blitz rate in the playoffs, and they continued that in this game. Meanwhile, Seattle played zone 83% of the time, which is pretty much average for them. It's actually slightly above average, and they got a 43% pressure rate, despite the fact that they only blitzed at a 13% rate. I mean, that is just that is a remarkable job by Seattle, being able to generate a significant amount of pressure without having to commit more than 4 bodies into the box. I mean, they just rushed 4, dropped 7, and they were harassing Drake May all night. So really impressive job by Seattle's front, dominant in the game. Meanwhile, on the New England side, a 57.5% blitz rate, which is 31% above league average. They were blitzing throughout the regular season at around a 25% rate. In the playoffs, the first 3 games, they were at like a 45% rate. Now here in the Super Bowl, 57.5%. My take on that is they probably felt like they could not move it consistently enough on offense, and the only way they were going to win this game is if they created a splash play and increased the variance on the defensive side of the ball by being very aggressive and sending a lot of pressure. And despite that, they only got home at a 35% pressure rate. I mean, just think about that. New England blitzed at almost a 2 times the amount of rate as they got pressure, whereas the Seahawks were the opposite. They blitzed at less than a half amount of snaps and was able to get pressure almost 3 times more. Actually, 3x. 13% blitz rate, 43% pressure rate for Seattle. For New England, the exact opposite. 57.5% blitz rate, 35% pressure rate. Just a unbelievable job. A boa constrictor defense by Seattle. And New England really didn't have much of a chance in the game. So we tipped the cap to Darnold. Again, not an MVP type performance in this game. Kenneth Walker won the MVP, rightfully so. He was fantastic. The run game for Seattle was really good. We could have used one more George Halani reception for our betting card. I ended up positive about 4.5 units on the night, about 10% ROI for those of you that follow my wagers. It wasn't a great night. It wasn't a bad night. I mean, I made money. But George Halani, I thought, we were on the over. That was one of our bigger bets, over 1.5 receptions, and he had 1 in the first half, and he had a few looks late, and Darnold was kind of spamming Cooper Kupp pretty much the entire game. Had a couple of other nice hits in the first half. I thought my reads on A.J. Barner and Mac Hollins were really good. Kayshon Boutte, really good read on him with the long reception. He had 1 catch, and it was a long one. Good read on Kenneth Walker's receiving props. So I thought I had a really good feel for the game. Didn't have a great feel for the side. I thought New England offensively was going to give us a little bit more. To be fair, that pick 6, really flipped it, right? I mean, it really, the box score kind of told me it should have been maybe a 10-point game, maybe a 7-point game, because, New England did move it better in the second half against Seattle, and really Seattle's offense didn't do a whole lot in the game. The pick 6 really sealed it, and I thought Drake May just was seeing ghosts. As we close the book on Sam Darnold's ghosts, they have been exorcised, and now we open the book on the demons of Drake May. Although he's young, I think this was a learning experience for him. I think he'll be back. I think he's got a chance to win the MVP. I think New England has a very, very bright future ahead of them with May and with Vrabel. Very good coaching staff. And you got May on a rookie deal for another 2 years. So you got a chance to build around him. And I think New England will definitely be a formidable opponent next year in the AFC East. I think Buffalo, obviously, they'll be right there. If we spin things forward to the 2026 season, let's take a look at the odds. I'll pull them up right now. I'm sure someone's got them posted already. Yep, DraftKings has them up already. I actually did. I'm sure all the other shops have them, but DraftKings is just the first book I pulled up. Seahawks and Rams are the favorites with the Bills, Eagles, Patriots, Ravens, Packers, Lions, Chargers, and Chiefs. I mean, I think if Stafford's back and he has the season that he had last year, I think the Rams obviously have to be in consideration. On the long shot side, I don't know. Don't really have a whole strong feel for any of these long shots right now. I mean, I guess you could make the case for San Francisco if they can ever figure out their injury situation. They're at 17-1 right now. The Texans are at 19-1. They're going to have a C.J. Stroud dilemma in the offseason. The Bears at 25-1 are interesting. I mean, I think the NFC is the better conference. So I would lean on the NFC side if I'm going to make a future this far out. And I really do. I thought Chicago made some nice strides this year. I think Ben Johnson's a really good coach. Like, if you're trying to figure out who the next Seattle's going to be, and the recipe was you have to have to be fair, the quarterback wasn't on a rookie deal. So you give John Schneider a lot of credit, but they had a lot of other really talented pieces on rookie deals. JSN, Walker, those guys were in the same class. And then the defense is very young. But the head coach situation, I mean, I think Ben Johnson is the real deal. So I would say Chicago maybe, but I'll be honest. I don't really like betting futures this far out. The process that I usually take during the football offseason is I'll take the next week or two off, and then I'll come back and I'll start pecking away at the draft and free agency and all the coaching changes, and I'll write capsules on each team. I kind of outlined that process last week where I'll do kind of an autopsy on each team, and I'll see what their needs are, and I'll see what kind of coaching moves they made, where their philosophies might be moving towards, teams with new GMs, new coaches, new coordinators, etc. And then once we get to April and we get through the draft in April and we get to May and we get a schedule, that's when I'll start diagnosing the season. And like, hey, this team has this path. I think this team has an easy rest schedule, whatever the quirks and the nuances of the schedule come out in May, and then we can really dive into, all right, I'm going to bet this team, over. I like this team in the division. This team has a young core, blah, 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 blah. So I wouldn't really put a whole lot of stock in anyone's predictions right now for next season. They're fun to do. They're a talking point. They're an interesting chatter, for the water cooler, but they don't really hold a whole lot of value to me in terms of the betting market, because I just don't like making a wager, on February 8th. It's not going to be decided until February of the next year. And that's just the way that I feel about the long-term futures market. So be mindful of that. Not something that I'm really interested in betting. Besides that, I really thought it was a successful season for me personally. I did not have a winning football season. I was good in the last two rounds of the playoffs. I was up 15 units in the championship round and the Super Bowl combined. But if you count the preseason, which was a disaster for me, I was down 20 units in the preseason. In the playoffs, I finished up 8.7 units, which means in the regular season, I finished down about 30 units. So not really a great season for me, frankly. Actually, not as bad. I only finished down about 10 units in the regular season. So down in the preseason, really bad. Down in the regular season, meh, bad. Up in the playoffs. That was the vibe for me in the NFL this year. Same thing in college football. Down in the regular season, up in the bowls. Finished about 10 units in the hole. So didn't do as well as I would have hoped. in the NFL and college football this year. That's why I didn't bet a whole lot in the Super Bowl. Last year I made 59 bets for Super Bowl 59. I put a whole article about it. I finished up in the Super Bowl last year too. It's actually the second. I've had a good run of Super Bowls over the last few years betting wise, but I just don't. I'm kind of in that mode now with gambling where I know what I am. I know that I'm not a professional at this. I know where my strengths and weaknesses are. I'm a really good situational handicapper. I'm really good at breaking down games. I'm really good at finding angles in the prop market that align with matchups that I see on tape. I'm okay at picking sides week to week. Okay, average. I'm average at totals. The things that I excel in are the situational spots, right? The bowl games. I do really great in every year because I'm good at kind of finding those angles. I do better in the playoffs when there's fewer games to talk about and I can really hone in on each game and really dive in. I mean, I absolutely crushed the championship Sunday and Super Bowl props because I can actually dive into each game and I don't feel overwhelmed by everything. And I felt the same way about the college football season. You know, once the bowl season gets here and there's only a handful of games on each day, a couple games here, one game there, and I can really lock in, that's where I excel. So the adjustment for me is to continue to be more conservative with my regular season and preseason approaches, and to then open up my arsenal more in the postseason and the bowl games, and continue to use that as a cadence for me in my gambling. Again, this is a learning process. I have now been doing this publicly since 2019. So before that, I was gambling like a sucker, like an idiot. I mean, I knew what I was doing. Like I knew how to place the bets, but I wasn't actually putting intent to learning and improving. And I was just betting, you know, like a gambling fool, like a degen. Then I started doing this job and I started taking it a lot more seriously. Then I started to link up with professionals and people who are actually in the field. And I started to learn because I'm a very curious individual. And over the last 3 years that I've done the BetUS podcast with Fez and with Las Vegas Chris and now Kevin O'Neill, that's when I've really came into my own. I mean, I was going through the numbers today with the BetUS stuff. Went 8-2 in the Super Bowl, 15-2 championship weekend and Super Bowl with the BetUS podcast picks. And if you go back right now, we've been doing this show for 3 years, 2023, 2024, and 2025. We've given out a handful of picks every week at the same time, consistent, very trackable, very transparent. And also you get into that groove and you start to learn and you start to get into a rhythm. Over 55% win rate for me on that podcast over a 3-year span, which at that point you kind of are what you are. And if that's the case, I'm a winning NFL bettor. Does that mean I'm going to win every week, every year? No. I was down this year because I didn't have a great season. I was much better in the first 2 years. In 2023 and 2024, I was 57.5%, 56.5%. This year, I was 53.5%. So, and I had a terrible preseason, which we didn't do the show during the preseason. If we did, I would have been down. But the regular season, the playoffs, I have now put together some really good stuff on tape that I'm proud of, that I can build off of. And I think that's something that there's a lot of people, most of the people who consume gambling content are in my position. They love sports. They grew up in a fantasy culture. They like betting. They like football, but they're not professional gamblers. That doesn't mean they're not serious gamblers. Like there's some people out there that are not serious. I don't need to name names. You know who they are. They're clowns. Most people are not that. Most people are betting a few bucks every week and they want to win. They actually want to win. They want to learn. I get a lot of people that flood my inboxes with questions and, you know, comments, and they want to learn. But they're not professional gamblers. They're betting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks a game at you know, they're doing it because they enjoy it and they love it. It's a hobby. And don't get me wrong, if you know how to control it and you don't chase your losses and you have a set amount and that's the amount you have on gambling, I am fully of the belief that betting can be an incredible teacher of discipline, of consistency, of being able to find hidden angles and do the work, do the research, know who are the sharp, like a lot of discernment, teaching yourself how to discern between not only people that are giving you analysis, but also things that you're seeing, the news cycle. You learn a lot about yourself, and your weaknesses and your strengths if you do this every day consistently and you actually have a plan and you put intent behind it. That's what I've been able to accomplish, I think, in this 7-year stretch. And now I feel comfortable where I know where I'm good. For example, I know I'm good at betting March Madness, but I only have a couple of conferences during conference tournament week that I'm really focusing on. And I only really hone into March Madness once I can narrow the field and really get invested in the games. Because during the regular season of college basketball, I'm not that invested. So if I do make any bets, I'm guessing or I'm tailing other people that I trust. But when I get to March Madness and I get to that narrow focus, like the bowl games, I improve my skills. And that's where I can risk a little bit more. Same thing with baseball. I stopped betting on baseball sides and totals years ago. I learned that that's not my strength. What are my strengths? Obviously the Nerfy and props. I've become really good at finding prop angles and identifying opportunities with data that I've been able to source and networks that I've been able to curate and finding those angles. I don't bet the NBA. I don't bet the NHL. Those are not sports that I really excel in. NFL draft. That's when I'll ramp up my risk. And then we get to the NFL offseason and we reset for football. So you just have to know what your strengths, what your weaknesses are. You find that cadence, and then you go by that calendar, and you kind of throttle up your risk, throttle down your risk as you are going through those times. So we're going through a risk-off time now, right? Football's over. College basketball is still kind of gearing up. I'm not going to be betting a whole lot of hoops over the next week or so. I'm going to take some time off, rest and relax, recharge, and then once I get to the end of this month, I'll be ready to go again, and we'll be ready for March Madness. We'll have a much narrower focus of the games that we have to focus on, and then we'll turn the page and get to baseball season, and then we'll turn the page again and get to the draft and get back into football mode. So understanding the ups and downs of your calendar, I think, is very important when you are going through a long haul of a sports calendar, of a sports season, and you have to know what you don't know. And I don't know a whole lot about the NBA or the NHL, so I stay away from those sports. I stay away from the things that I don't know a whole lot of. Or if I do go near them, I ask a lot of questions, and I have people who I trust who give me information. And if I have information that I think is valuable, I'll pass that on to you. But that will conclude football season. Excited to take a breather. It's been a long year. I've had a great year physically. I've had a great year with my fasting and my fitness. I'm excited to continue that and continue to share that journey with you here on this show and on my social media channels. And that is going to be a big part of this month for me as I kind of recharge. I'm going to focus a lot on my fitness, a lot on my fasting, a lot on my ability to take care of my body, my mind, as I continue this journey forward. But very excited about what is to come in 2026. As the year of the snake comes to an end, we do our final shedding, our final detoxing, and we are able to move forward into the year of the horse. February 17th is the official Chinese New Year, and that's when the year of the wild, I think it's the wild fire horse, that will be moving us forward in 2026. It's going to be a big part of my journey, and I'm very excited to share that with you. All right, let's get to some topical stuff, because now we're going to kind of tease you on the transition of what this podcast is going to become. And it's going to be a lot more topical, which means it might be a little more controversial, which means I might piss some of you off with my opinions. That's okay. It's okay for my opinion to be different than yours. I'm not telling you that I'm right. Sometimes I might. But with a lot of these stories, I'm just going to share my opinion. And I hope that at least sparks a discussion, because I think the one thing we lack in today's society is the ability for civil discourse. Do you know how many people I have to remove as followers or block on my social media because I post an opinion about something and their response is very vulgar and very aggressive and not necessarily trying to argue with me or debate me with logic on the issue, but just kind of beating me down and degrading me and demoralizing me for having the opinion. And that's where I feel like we have a struggle in this country. That's why, listen, I don't want this to be political. There are going to be some stories that we discuss that will have political implications. For example, the one that we're going to talk about tonight about the Olympics is kind of in that vein. But when it crosses over into the sports world, I feel not obligated, but I feel inclined to discuss it because I do think it's things that impact our daily sports lives. And politics, as much as I hate politics, and I hate politics, it's a part of our lives. And it has become more part of the sports conversation recently than it's ever been before. And it's, at least it keeps me entertained. I'll leave it at that. So I encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast and you hear something that I say that bothers you, that makes you feel something, first of all, good. That's the point. Second of all, absorb it, feel it, and then respond to me politely, respectfully, and I'll respond back. If you're respectful and you don't call me names and belittle me and call me a doo-doo head, for having the opinion, and you actually debate me on the issue respectfully, I will debate back. The problem is we just don't have a whole lot of that on social media. Even people who I consider friends either unfollow me or are very nasty to me online when I express an opinion about something. I would never respond to someone in a really nasty, hateful way on social media. I might be like sarcastic, like maybe a little snarky, but I would never be like vulgar or aggressive, where I'm calling someone a name or like belittling them just for having an opinion. Like I might point out their fallacy of logic in maybe a sarcastic way and it might bother them. But my goal is to not be disrespectful. And I hope that you take that same approach with me. So the story that we are going to discuss tonight is about Hunter Hess. Who is Hunter Hess? So Team USA Olympic freestyle skier was asked a question by the media about how he feels representing his country at the Olympics. And his response went viral. I actually have the clip for you here that I'm going to play. And we're going to try this, see if I get the technology right. But here is Hunter Hess on his feelings representing his country at the Olympics.
It brings up mixed emotions to represent the U.S. right now, I think. It's a little hard. There's obviously a lot going on that I'm not the biggest fan of, and I think a lot of people aren't. If it aligns with my moral values, I feel like I'm representing it. Just because I'm wearing the flag doesn't mean I represent everything that's going on in the U.S. So yeah, I just kind of want to do it for my friends and my family and the people that support me getting here.
Whew. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is I respect Hunter's right to speak his mind. Free speech is obviously something I value a lot. A lot of the athletes that Hunter is competing against do not have that luxury. There's a lot of athletes from countries that have much stricter laws against speaking out towards the government and towards current administration policies, et cetera, whatever the issues that Hunter has. I respect his right to speak his mind. Here's where I wish he would have altered his statement. So first of all, the thing I want to lay out some facts here. The U.S. government does not fund the Olympic program. That I think is a very important thing. So he is not an employee of the U.S. government. However, there is a bit of a tweak this year that because of this billionaire investor Ross Stevens and his $100 million pension plan that he donated to the U.S. Olympic team, every Olympian, usually it's just if you get a medal and you'll get some side deals, endorsements, but this year, for the first time, every Olympian who qualifies for the games, U.S. Olympian, will receive a $100,000 gift in cash at age 45 or 20 years after he competes. So essentially a retirement gift at age 45 of $100,000. And they will also receive a life insurance plan worth $1,000. They get to, or excuse me, $100,000 that they get to designate to a death beneficiary of their choice. So essentially a free life insurance policy. So in total, this gift is going to be worth about $200,000 that the Olympians are getting just for competing in the games. They could finish in dead last. Doesn't matter. They're still going to get a $200,000 gift. Essentially, they are an employee of the U.S. Olympics. I mean, I think at this point, with that level of money going to them, it is fair to say that, I don't want to say it's life-changing for some of them, but I'll leave it at this. And I'm about to be 40 years old. If I knew that in 5 years, I've got $100,000 waiting for me in the bank, I'd be living my life a little bit differently right now. I might be going on that vacation that I wouldn't have gone on in the summer, knowing that in 6 years I've got $100K coming. So I just think that there is a level of responsibility to the respect of the U.S. Olympic team, period, end of story. The thing that really bothers me about this is the Olympics to me are about bringing people together. They are about showcasing sports on the highest stage. And I know that in the past there have been political statements at the Olympics, right? Jesse Owens with the fist up, that's the one that comes to mind. I think the circumstances there were a little bit different than what we're seeing today. And I actually agree that there are some things going on in this country right now that I do not agree with. And I do not agree with everything that the current administration is doing. I think they're doing a lot of things good, and I think they're doing a lot of things bad. And I think there's a middle ground to strike right here. What I would have loved to hear Hunter say is, I am proud to represent my country. That's all I would have wanted to hear him say. You could have also said, there's a lot of things going on right now that I don't agree with, mixed emotions, blah, 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 but I am proud to be here and represent my country at the Olympics and to be an ambassador for my nation. That is a very simple media deflection tactic that I think would go a long way in kind of smoothing things out. And for the record, I would have felt the same way if there was a Democrat in the White House right now. Again, I'm not a very political person, but it doesn't really matter who's in the White House or what's going on. If you are representing the country at the Olympics and you could literally care less, like he literally said it in the clip, I'm just here for my friends and my family and the people who support me. So essentially everyone else can go fuck themselves. It comes off very entitled. And I just don't know if that's the message that we want to be sending to the world right now when we are trying to unify things. So he's kind of pouring gasoline on the fire. Now, that's the part of this that I really take offense. And it has actually nothing to do with what Hunter said. The part of this that really bothers me is what the reporters are doing. And I think as a reporter myself, I feel like I have a really strong opinion and can speak out on this because I kind of understand how questions get asked at these press conferences. These reporters are trying to, most of the media does lean left. The reporters are trying to get the soundbite out of these athletes. Hunter is not the first athlete that has been asked about, hey, how do you feel about representing your country at the Olympics? It is a very popular question that these Olympians are getting. And I personally think that's questionable ethics. I think the reporters are there to cover the athletes and the games and not try to suck out political opinions. Now, if an athlete makes a statement on his own personal social media, if he comes out and says something on his own, I think that's okay. But the reporters are trying to kind of needle these answers. You are not there to report on the athlete's political beliefs. That is not relevant to the Olympic Games. And I think these reporters are overstepping, and they are, again, questionable journalistic ethics. Because what I believe that's happening is the reporters have certain beliefs. They don't like what's happening in this country, and they feel that if they can get the athlete to say it, then they can put out a story that they want to put out about the U.S. being viewed as this, and this is wrong, but they can kind of buffer themselves by using the athlete as the mouthpiece. And I think, again, that is questionable journalistic ethics. I put this into Grok, and I went back and I did a little bit of research. So if you go back into the Obama and Biden administrations, and you go back and you look at the interviews and you examine the interviews that the athletes gave during the Olympics while Biden and Obama were in office, nobody asked a question about, are you proud to represent your country at the Olympics? Those questions were not asked to American athletes. And Obama and Biden did have some controversial policies, right? I'm not saying they were bad, but they had some controversial policies over the years. And I thought it was unique that only this crop of Olympians are getting asked this question, and it wasn't being asked in prior administrations. Even in the Clinton days, the athletes were not asked, are you proud to represent your country at the Olympics? And make no mistake about it, Bill Clinton, I mean, you want to talk about an embarrassing moment, getting caught cheating on your wife with an intern in the Oval Office, and none of the athletes were asked about that at the Olympics. Why? Because the Olympics are not for politics. It is not a time for reporters to be needling athletes about political opinions. That is a time to be focused on the games and the competition. So while some of the blame can be on Hunter Hess, he probably could have handled that question a little bit better and been a little bit more neutral, right? Deflect away from the negative and focus on the positive. We're at the Olympics. We're trying to bring people together. I want to be an ambassador for the game or for skiing or for our country. But I would say more of the blame falls on the reporters. And I think the reporters need to clean up their journalistic ethics. Focus on the athletes competing and not their political views. So that's my 2 cents on the Hunter Hess controversy and all of the other athletes that are being asked these questions about politics. There's a time and place to talk about politics. It's not the Olympics. It's just not. And I think the reporters are trying to make it about something that it shouldn't be. And that is the big issue that I have with what is happening right now in Milan. I'll be watching. I love the Olympics. The Winter Olympics are awesome. The hockey's great. The skiing is nuts. The bobsled, it's an awesome, awesome spectacle. We don't need to muddy it with politics. Like, leave the politics to the politicians and the people who cover politics and the people who cover Congress and the White House and all that stuff. Athletes going overseas should be focused on the sports that they are competing in. I actually noticed that a lot of the other athletes from other countries that are being asked similar questions are deflecting them very successfully. It only seems to be a handful of American athletes that are taking the bait and giving these reporters something to chew on. So I encourage some media training for these U.S. Olympians and reporters. Get it together, man. Let's keep our eyes on the prize here. This is a beautiful spectacle of athletic competition, and I think we should keep the focus on that as we move forward through the Olympics. The other big story, this will be our final story of the show. Joey Aguilar filed a temporary restraining order against the NCAA, and it got approved. So there's a chance, again, Joey Aguilar came into college football in 2019 in junior college, and now he is trying to appeal to the NCAA to play in 2026. So the temporary restraining order on February 4th issued a 15-day order in the Knox County Knox County Chancery Court. The next step, Aguilar is going to seek a preliminary injunction, which could extend his eligibility to the 2026 season. The problem here is time, because obviously things are moving very quickly for Tennessee. They need to figure out if they have a quarterback for next year. This is, of course, on the heels of another preliminary injunction in Tuscaloosa with Charles Bediako and the Alabama situation. So we've had, so far, I documented all this because the college sports offseason so far, we've had Duke suing Darian Mensah, Pete Golding tampering with Dabo Swinney, Rutgers $500 million in debt since joining the Big Ten, and now Joey Aguilar filing a temporary restraining order against the NCAA. College football is off its freaking rocker right now. It is the love child of ballers and billions. I've said this a million times, and I will continue to echo it. We are going down a very dangerous path in college sports. I don't know what the answer is. Teams are suing each other. Teams are suing players, tampering. You have debt because of all the travel and all the NIL and all the expenses that these college programs are having to extend themselves with to get these players played. It is a freaking jungle out there, and we need some kind of order because we're going to keep spiraling until we have some governing body say, this is what's legal, this is what's not, and we need guardrails. Like the temporary restraining orders for eligibility, like the Trinidad Chance thing, trying to get another year. And I think we just need to have a system in place in the NCAA where you get 5 years. No more red shirt this and maybe medical, red shirt that. No, you get 5 years, period. What you do with those 5 years is up to you. You want a red shirt one, you don't want a red, whatever. You get 5 years. After 5 years, you're moving on. You don't get 6 because you had tonsillitis your freshman season. You don't get to stay a 7th year because you were in junior college and you had this happen, and now you're going to file a temporary restraining order against the college, against the NCAA, because you feel like you should get another year. I understand why these kids want to do it. They're making millions of dollars to stay in school. I mean, it's genius. But it's also we need to put a stop to it, because if not, they're going to keep taking advantage of the system. The tampering that's going on with these recruits and these transfers. Like, it's wild right now what's happening. And I don't know where the end is, because there is no governing body telling us right from wrong. And that is something that I think we really need in college football desperately as we move forward with this system. So that's what I've got for you here this week. Congratulations again to the Seattle Seahawks winning the Super Bowl. I will be back in 2 weeks. We're taking a week off. Gonna enjoy my Valentine's Day, gonna enjoy my vacation. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another show. We'll update you on how things are going as we head into March Madness, and we will continue to move forward into the year of the fire horse in 2026. But I appreciate you all joining in. Episode 22, the morning after Super Bowl 60 in the books. We'll see you next time on TMA.